These are for you.
Oh, wow. Ah, this is it. These are the postcards, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they're fantastic. Look at that. It's so vibrant, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's I always love the colours on them. The they always print better on things like this than they do on the actual bottle in the end. We always have a bit of a nightmare with the bottle. But it tells a story as well, and that's what I wanted it to do.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the roaring 2020s, but they haven't quite started yet. So I'm Tim Simmons. I'm the founder of Sippello Aperitif, a little one-man band, which is often quite exhausting. We use all natural ingredients, and I'm not a fan of using food colorings or anything like that in drinks. I don't really see the point of them. So each batch is slightly different in terms of color and texture. My background is actually as a drink to market analyst, so I spent a lot of time doing kind of consultancy for the big drinks companies. None of them ever did anything that I suggested, so I've gone out on my own and done my own thing, really, just to prove that I can in many ways. We've sort of found a natural spot of being served in kind of top 100 cocktail bars, Michelin-style restaurants, that kind of thing. And we like to say that Sippello is in venues where ingredients matter. I'd always had it in the back of my mind that I wanted my own distillery. There was something kind of, I don't know if romantic's the right word, but there's something that always feels very homely about a distillery to me. Some people get that with libraries and things like that. For me, I don't know why, because I don't really understand what happens in them. I'm not science techie, and a lot of these guys are science nerds that are working with stills. And in many ways, that's why with the Sippello production, we are macerating instead of distilling, because the long-term goal that I've always had is to produce Sippello in different countries around the world. Use it as a kind of USP, really. Australia, US, places like that, where they have their own local fruits that we can play with. Maybe move away from gooseberries, maybe use cherries or something like that. But that's always been the aim. And we've already got a couple of distilleries ready to go abroad, which will be quite exciting. But with all these things, you need a lot of money, and that's not really my forte at the moment. It's not something I'm blessed with deep pockets. I've got very shallow pockets, sadly, but we're getting there bit by bit. But yeah, so I always wanted my own distillery. I'd always wanted to create my own drinks brand. I always wanted to show my own creativity. In many ways, Sippello is like my art in some ways. It's a liquid love letter to the eccentric in all of us. That's what I wanted to create. My marketing's probably not class enough to get that across just yet, but we're learning as we go. Could probably do with a marketing person. And yeah, so I suppose a lot of it came from when I was a kid. I always felt like kind of different from everyone else. My brother, sister, and I were the only kids at school that had lost parents and all this kind of stuff. So you always felt like the gooseberry in the middle in every situation. And so discovering gooseberry as a fruit to use in the aperitif was a really nice breakthrough. And it was kind of nice and symbolic for the sort of life I felt I'd led so far. So it's a bit of a happy coincidence that gooseberry as an expression exists as well, the gooseberry in the middle kind of thing. So that was my reasoning for starting Sippello, but also I'd always wanted to create something that lasts generations. I suppose legacy is what drives me more than anything. When I left my old company, I thought I'd pick up work really quickly in senior management role. Did lots of interviews, no one wanted me. So I kind of thought, damn, I'm going to have to do this myself. I'm not going to be able to mess up someone else's money. I'm going to have to use my own pennies. So I quickly started doing that. And hopefully now we've got a product that will stand the test of time that I can hand down to my daughters in due course, really. And that's why my daughter's called Iris and Lily, and they're the flowers on the bottle. So the Sippello bottle was 2 sets of petals coming down, one going up, one coming down. And I thought if I can get them on the bottle, then that will manipulate them to actually stay in the business long term. So they don't really have a choice now. And anyway, they love it. They help at fairs and all that kind of stuff. So I say help, but often a hindrance, as kids can be, like pets. But yeah, they're super excited about taking over the business someday. They've already decided what jobs they want to do, and hopefully I can keep it alive long enough for them to be able to do that.
So what are their desired jobs?
Well, my daughter Lily sees herself as a bit of a creative as well, and so she wants to do that side of things. My daughter Iris is very particular about rules and regulations, so I think she is kind of future CEO, and then Lily will be the wild card that's probably good in the marketing department, to be fair, whilst my oldest can sort out the financials and all that kind of, probably better already than I can, to be honest. She brings homework back. She's like, oh my God, we discovered this new thing about algebra today. I'm like, you're talking to the wrong person, love, sorry. Like, don't start talking about it now, because you're going to realise how thick your dad actually is. So I try and avoid any conversations about technicalities around maths and things like that, which is probably a fault of mine, really, because ultimately businesses are run on Excel sheets, and I still can't work my way around them at all. So yeah, probably not the most sound basis for building a business when the only person that works for it can't work at an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, but sometimes people with Excel spreadsheets don't have the passion that is needed to keep a business going.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I suppose I'm at the situation now where I'm starting to see, as Sippello is now 3 years old, I'm starting to see the difference between brands that are run as hobbies that think they're going to have a business long term, and brands that are built as businesses, right? And I suppose I'm starting to see to sort of transition into the business side of things, rather than just this passionate thing of me going out saying, wouldn't you rather have something natural in your drink than something totally artificial? I feel that bartenders haven't been quite quick enough to pick up on real and local ingredients, but maybe we launched too early. It's the sense I'm getting at the moment, is that some of the 5-star hotels are starting to look a lot more at local, starting to look a lot more at provenance, and that's something that's been at the heart of what we've done all the way along. And I'm not saying we were miles ahead of everyone else. It's just when building a drinks brand for the first time, that's the only way I knew how to do it. So I looked at the sourcing. I didn't see the point of picking ingredients that were unsustainable. I also, at the time, we were looking at, I always say we, but it's just me, but looking at the framework of where we get our ingredients from and how things like shipping around Brexit were going to hamper things. So you had to look at ingredients that could be grown in the UK as well. So a lot of our botanicals come from Cornwall, for instance. Whereas I think historically you could have actually just started sourcing them cheaper from other places around the world. But we like to try and keep things as British as possible. And hence the use of nostalgic British fruits as well, like gooseberries and rhubarb, and less nostalgic but future legend, the chuckleberry, that everyone always chuckles about. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people think I'm the third chuckle brother or something like that. They certainly do. In presentations, there's always a certain age of male that it always sits at the back of all these like tastings we do at private members clubs, 5-star hotels and stuff, that can't resist shouting to me, to you, all this kind of stuff. And I think I'm done with playing along with it now. You get to that point where you're like, Christ, I have dignity. I'm not indulging this conversation any further. It's always a tricky balance, isn't it?
Yeah. So you say you think you started maybe too early, but I think it would be interesting to know, like, how you started. Tell us a little bit about the way that you entered the market, so to speak, at a time that was quite tough.
Yeah, I mean, there probably wasn't a tougher time to launch a drinks brand, really. So I spent a lot of lockdown batching and blending ingredients, but even then that was challenging because the distillery shut down to do hand sanitizer. So all the best laid plans about launching at X date were soon out the window. And so when I started, it was I think I had the first kind of micro batch ready for people to try in the November, December 2020. And the idea was to launch in the April 2021. But our glass was 6 months late, which at the time felt like a massive hindrance. We missed this whole summer of commercial activity. But in the end, I think it probably did us a bit of a favour. Because what we do with creating the liquid is unlike what anyone else does, and it wasn't a deliberate thing about, oh, we're going to be really innovative and do this. If anything, it was more kind of retrospective, kind of going back to previous traditions to see how we could refine them and make something really delicious and more modern out of it. But in doing so, you come up against things like shelf life and stuff. And in hindsight, we probably could have done with another 6 months of development. There was a lot of changes with the team at the distillery, and the knowledge of how to produce it wasn't passed on from distiller to distiller in terms of, the chuckleberry takes 5 weeks to macerate. Some of the botanicals take 3 days. So all the ingredients have to steep separately so that you're not over stewing some, that kind of thing. And a lot of that information was repeatedly lost along the process. So it felt like every batch we were starting again. And we're in that weird situation of being a small craft brand where every batch could always be your last as well. So you always want to try and make it like the best possible. So although we mostly use the same recipe every time, if we can make it better, then we will do.
So how did you actually enter the market? Tell us, that was a tough time. So how did you manage to get the word out that you have this new drink, and what did you do?
Instagram basically. So I went on, I'd made this batch. We had about 30 litres, I think, and split it up into 20 cl bottles. Everyone told me to give everyone 5 cls, but I thought, if someone gives me a 5 cl, I'm going to think, what tight bastard, what am I supposed to do with this? So I thought, right, I'll give everyone 20 cl bottles. And then I thought, Christ, who am I going to give it to? I don't know any bartenders, and none of them are in their bars because they're all on furlough. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I went on to Instagram. I found about 150 bartenders, wrote to every single one of them and said, look, I've made this thing. It's kind of quirky. It's a very unusual liquid, but I think it's delicious. But what I don't know is what to do with it. So could I post a sample to you and then you tell me what you would do, how you'd improve it, and all this kind of stuff? So we made this batch, which was called the Blenders batch. And I took that to probably 120 bartenders' houses. So when they wrote back saying, yeah, I've got nothing to do, send me a little bottle, I thought, Christ, well, I might as well, what's the difference between a DPD man turning up and me? And if there's an opportunity to have a conversation, then I'm there, we can chat. And that's how it occurred, basically. So a lot of bartenders' first experiences are a guy that looked like a courier turning up on front doorstep, massively out of breath, sweating, dying, basically, sweating and yet freezing at the same time because it was December, January. And their first experience was meeting me with this quirky little bottle going, can you tell me what you would do with this? And then quickly word got around. This guy's going around dropping samples off. Bartenders would say, oh, I love this stuff. Contact their head bartender or, whoever it was and say, oh, you should get a hold of this and then see what you can do with it. And then as soon as lockdown broke, or whatever they want to call it, we started popping up on drinks menus, which was great, obviously, and I was enormously grateful, but we hadn't got into production yet. So there's all these things that you just, owning a business like repeatedly putting out fires, so I then had to go off and do, at vast expense, a commercial run that wasn't meant to actually be bottled because our glass was still hadn't arrived. So people started putting Sippello on the menus, and I was cycling around mostly London, but also posting off to Schofields at Manchester and places like that, doing 2.5 litre jerry cans, which when you're delivering a 2.5 litre jerry can and you're getting to the front door of a 5-star hotel like the Langham, and you go to walk through the front door with a jerry can, it kind of looks like you're about to torch the place. So I was stopped quite often, and I got to know the guts of the building by going through the back and delivering that way, which is also, the part about enjoying being in a distillery and things like that, seeing behind the scenes stuff really excites me. You know, when you go into these hotels and you see the actual operation working, it's just like this massive machine. You know, it's all these cogs just ticking, and yeah, I love that stuff. It's a sneak behind, isn't it? You know.
I love that too. We used to do a regular event at the Savoy. So we used to get into the innards of the Savoy, which was amazing. So much history, so much cool
Yeah,
stuff there. So,
it's where the real stuff is,
yeah,
isn't it? You know,
it is.
and it never looks like you would expect it to either. It's just the bars and the restaurants and the facade, really, of what is a big engine that's just constantly pumping. There's people running everywhere, and yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not how we produce. Everything just sits in the alcohol for 5-6 weeks. There's no running that happens. You know, it's just a patient game. You know, good things come to those who wait. I think Guinness used to say.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit before about the roaring 2020s. So tell us a bit about how that fit into kind of the bottle design and the label and how that all kind of came about.
Yeah, well, my feeling at the time of when lockdown was going to be lifted was that we'd all go nuts. I thought this is going to be the biggest party for centuries. You know, it's going to be like celebrations like the end of the Second World War, people out on the street inviting all their mates around, you know, this kind of stuff, just basically having a big party, letting the tension out. And so the neck label for Sippello became this picture scene of a garden party with people, you know, people drinking and people snogging as well. I thought, you know, we're not allowed to touch. Maybe we'll be allowed to snog when we come out of lockdown.
And so who designed it? How did that all work?
Well, my cousin has his own business called Bear Arms, and he is really good mates with one of the guys behind a company called Kingdom and Sparrow, which is based down in Falmouth. And they were absolutely brilliant. And when you're a one-man band, you almost need people to say no to you a lot because you always have ideas. Every morning I'm like, oh, yeah, I could do this. Why don't I do this? This would be amazing. And then I think, is it going to be commercially successful? Probably not. You know, you go into something like Sippello, which is incredibly niche, and then you just keep having more great ideas about even increasingly more niche products that are going to come off the back of it. And you just think, Christ, I'm short of cash as it is. You know, I won't sell 3 bottles of that stuff. So yeah, maybe business isn't the right thing for me. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah. So Kingdom and Sparrow came on board. They were absolutely unbelievable. I worked hand in glove with them. Because we talked so much about the liquids and the concept, you know, legacy, all this kind of stuff. The brief was to be a timeless classic bottle, so it needed to look like an international craft brand right from the start. I knew that it would just be me for a really long period of time, so the bottle almost had to work for itself. It had to sit on the shelf. It had to get people to ask what it is, and that's a big part of Sippello still. You know, I was in Kent at the beginning of the week, and a lot of bartenders were talking to me at our stand at the Page and Sons tasting, and they were saying people come in constantly and sit at the bar and go, "What's that?" And they'll sit there with a pint of bitter and go, "What's that?" And then next thing they'll order a Negroni or a Spritz, or, you know, "Can you make me something with that?" And that's what we needed, really. So it kind of worked in that sense. And they were absolutely brilliant, Kingdom of Sparrow. And we came second in I think it's like the Guild of Designers or something like that. It was a really big deal at the time. And I probably wouldn't remember it that much, but we lost to a Kazakh cheese. So that always just sticks in my mind. I didn't try the cheese, but the packaging was pretty good. Yeah, better than Sippello? I'm not so sure, but, you know, that's just preference and probably bias as well. And we wanted to incorporate lots of different parts of the stories and things like that had kind of built up as Sippello was being produced, one of which was my grandmother used to take us to the Savoy for pre-theatre meal. We used to go to, and I still hate them with a passion, musicals. We used to go to musical. Oh my God. They're just impossible to fall asleep in because they're so loud and they're just so like happy and yay. And I'd rather watch something serious, you know, or play on my phone these days. But she used to take us to these these pre-theatre meals at the grill, and then we'd go off. And of course, I was always wowed, as I still am actually, as you approach the Savoy and you've got the big signs and stuff. And I'm still like, oh wow, this is really cool. You know, I almost don't go to the Savoy as much as I should because I still want to maintain that kind of wow factor whenever I go. And so the bottom petals on the bottle of Sippello are very much the kind of Art Deco style of the Savoy as you go in. And so I wanted to incorporate that into the story. Also because I thought if we have something that looks a bit like the Savoy, maybe the Savoy will stock it. Unfortunately, they have, but that was more Anna Sebastian than them. She's been an absolute hero of mine. And yeah, it's stories like that I wanted to bring into the bottle. And when I started, I had two business partners. I won't name them because one doesn't know the story around this. The other one does, and he's very proud of it. But when I started, I had two business partners, and they admitted that in nightclubs, when everyone else was drinking, they'd sneak off and go and snog in the corner. So we've got our two guys snogging on the corner. And I think to this day, I'm yet to see one, so I might be wrong, but I think we're probably the only product in the world we've got two men snogging on the label. And it's why I'm always so keen to do things around pride and things like that, because you can just have so much fun with it. And the whole different by nature tagline kind of pulls into that as well. We're all different, and it's a bit like our ingredients. They're all the same, but actually they come out differently every time. So it's something that when I get the vocabulary for it, it's something I'd like to push further.
What do you mean when you get the vocabulary?
Well, I find it very hard as a straight male to talk about it, But ultimately, my previous business partner Paul was gay, and he always wanted Sippello to be like the next gay icon, and I'd still love it to be. I think it's just got so much potential to be this kind of vehicle, of creativity and acceptance and all that kind of thing. And I think, particularly now, if you're looking at the politics in the world, you need these little shining lights, and there aren't many. And I can't see the big corporates doing it because ultimately they want to sell bottles and they don't want to be divisive and things like that. But I own this brand, so ultimately I can do whatever the hell I like with it. And if it fails, then that's on me. And so I'm very keen to get more involved in the community, supporting the gooseberries in the middle. That was the whole story behind it.
I love that. Maybe that could be a little bit of a shout out in this somebody with a pride event that they want, work with you maybe.
Well, we did the pride event on the Thames, which was unbelievably good. Unfortunately, the venue didn't open it up to us again last year. 2 years ago, we had a boat on the Thames, and we had 6 cocktails by 6 gay London bartenders, and it was a riot. It was so much fun. We had gay DJ, gay band. Me and my brand ambassador Nick, we were dressed up as the old Jean Paul Gaultier bottles with sailors' outfits and cravats and things like that. And it was just so much fun. There's so much lovely energy around those occasions, and I just love being present with Sippello in them. And we're talking to a few bars around the country actually now about maybe not doing floats because ultimately you need money. So that's not something I'm blessed with, but certainly around activations around Pride in Brighton and Margate and places like that, and that's something really exciting to look forward to. I'm not sure my Jean Paul Gaultier outfit still fits me, but I'll cram into it if I need to.
Let out the seams a little bit, you'll be fine.
Well, it's that, yeah. It's not so much Popeye as Pop Belly, but I'll do it anyway. I'm pretty shameless in that respect.
So the bottle that you spoke about before, it's not a generic one. You decided to go all out. Tell us a little bit about that and the process and who made it and the thoughts of how it was done.
Yeah, I think I'd always looked at, as everyone in the industry does, you always look at the back bar and you think what stands out. And you look at brands like Saint Germain, for instance, and it's a really simple offering, effectively, elderflower liqueur. But the packaging just probably helps with, 30% of their sales. We go, I love that. And then they try it and they go, oh, I actually like what's in it as well. So I think standing out was really important. I looked at a lot of back bars. I thought, God, it's just a sea of glass. There's so many generic bottles out there. The big glass producers, and we work with one, have a lot of stock bottles, and different brands from different categories have the same glass bottle. and I just didn't want to be uniform. It was a product that I really wanted to stand out in all senses. Very different liquid, very different packaging, different ethos. All this kind of stuff. And I felt like if we just put it in a stock bottle, that kind of detracts from it. And as I said before, because I'm a one-man band, it has to sell itself. So it needed to stand out. It needed to stand there and demand attention. And I feel like we've achieved that, because the amount of bars I've been sat in having a quiet drink and someone sits down next to me and asks the bartender, what's that bottle? And then invariably drags me into the conversation, which I always quite enjoy, actually. I love meeting the public and stuff. It's always great fun. I love doing pop-ups and all this kind of stuff. I'm not, going back to the Excel spreadsheet, I'm not a back office kind of guy. That's not where my strengths lie. It's very much kind of being out and chatting and presenting and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, having a bottle that stands out plays into that.
And Sippello itself, what is it? What is its taste? Tell us a little bit about the liquid.
Yeah, so I mean the provenance and the natural elements were the two most important things for me. I also wanted to look at, obviously we use a lot of hand-picked British fruit. All our fruit is British, basically. And there's a lot of nostalgia around like gooseberries and things like that. So I wanted to bring in things that were just typically British that no one else could replicate. And I also don't think, in hindsight, although it didn't feel like it at the time, but no one ever thinks to put things like gooseberry and gentian together, or rhubarb and sandalwood, and all this kind of stuff. And if they do, they're not using real fruit in it. So I wanted to basically, in a small way, support like British farming and things like that. We'd always done fruit picking when I was a kid. We'd go down to Garster's farm in Esher, where I'm from. I think we're the fourth, maybe fifth generation of fruit pickers that go there. I take my daughters down there now. And we've always thoroughly enjoyed picking those types of fruit. So I wanted to use something that meant something to me as well. And I think provenance and things like that should become more important. There's a lot of brands out there that either don't have a accurate provenance and sometimes a very misleading one as well. Reading some articles recently about production of different products that are supposedly from exotic places, actually made in industrial estates in Scotland and Warrington and places like that. So I wanted something genuine. And I think if I'm going to get this product off the ground, it has to be authentic. And so in using ingredients like that, you end up with something that is unique and flavoured differently. And so with the gooseberries, you've also got the gentian, the wormwoods, chona, all this kind of stuff, which is, I didn't realise at the time, it's the bark of the fever tree, which is where they extract the quinine from, and all this kind of stuff. So even every ingredient has a really nice story to it. And there's orris in there as well, which is the last ingredient that we stumbled across. But my grandmother was the person who held our whole family together when we, others passed away. But and orris is the root of the iris flower. And so I always felt like my grandmother was the glue that held us all together, and orris is known as a flavour binder, so that brings all the flavours together. So when I found out about it, I was like, oh, that has to go in. I don't really care what it tastes like, but it means a lot to me, so it's going in. Of course, my daughter's called Iris and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of a personal message in there as well, without it being a kind of vanity project. It's all meaningful stuff.
Was your grandmother's name Iris?
Yeah. Yeah, my mum died when I was in my late teens, and I moved in with my grandmother after that, and she was just amazing, like absolutely amazing. And so I wanted to get that orris in there as a, as an homage in many ways.
So in what way?
And the name has got a meaning as well. Hello.
The name has several meanings, some official, some unofficial. All of them true though. So I lived in Spain, Italy, and France when I was a kid. And so I wanted something that sounded quite Mediterranean-y. And if it was a little sip in Italian, you're using the word sip, it would be like, oh, Sippello, like a little sip. But also in Spanish, ello means like it or that. So it became like sip it, sip that. And I thought that had quite a nice kind of fit to it really. But also when I started with my two business snoggers, we we couldn't settle on a name, and so I decided I was gonna come up with a name using all our different initials, and I came up with Sippello. And I wanted to find a definition behind it, so that's when Sip and A came in, and Sippello, and all this kind of stuff. So maybe everything's been overthought, and there's too many explanations for it, but they're all true. They're all the real reasons. And then the benefit of that, of course, I never wanted to make something that sounded Italian. That was never my goal. I went into a distillery, started playing around with all these natural ingredients, and as I was there, it took on a bitterness, and then bartenders started using it in their Negronis, which had never been a thought for me, and that hadn't been a target. I just wanted to make something, put it out there, and see what people thought. I hope it did well. But the byproduct of that was that a lot of Italians picked it up thinking it was an Italian product. And they're like, hey, it's Sippello. Yeah, we can play with this. I love Italian, all this kind of stuff. And then they'd see Surrey Hills, where in Italy is that? And it's funny how these things translate, because I was telling, I think it was a couple of Aussies actually, funny enough, about the provenance of the Surrey Hills, and they started wetting themselves laughing. And apparently, I don't know if it's in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever it is, there's an area called Surrey Hills, but it's where like all the crack addicts hang out and all this kind of stuff. So it made me chuckle a lot. I thought, Christ, when we produce down there, we might not say it's from the Surrey Hills,
Yeah, might taste a little bit. So, how is it best drank? Tell us a little bit about the cocktails.
Well, obviously Negronis is a go-to. A lot of people pick it up in Negronis. People at home tend to pick it up and put it with champagne. That tends to be the way, as a sort of celebratory drink. I'm a great fan of Sippello and tonic, or Sippello and flavoured soda. But ultimately, one of the reasons it has been as successful as it is that it's super versatile. So it can go in all sorts of cocktails. I also love a Naked and Famous, and think that is massively undersold. I think every menu should have a Naked and Famous on it, and Boulevardiers, all the classics basically. And it was never a deliberate action to make something versatile, but I wanted to make something that was delicious over ice or with soda, and as a result of that, you have to refine it until it's just really tasty. And when you get to that point, if it goes with soda, there's no hiding place for your ingredients. If you've got crap in there, you put crap in, you're going to get crap out. And so we got to a point where it just tasted delicious with soda, delicious over ice, delicious with tonic. And then bartenders created the sort of cocktail legacy behind it. None of my input, really. I mean, obviously, I said this is how you should drink it.
Yeah.
But no one listens. They're not interested in what I've got to say. They want to create their own things out of it, and we've seen all sorts of cocktails come to life as a result, which is amazing.
And if you could start all over again, what kind of things would you change?
What would I change? I mean, from a business perspective, the things I would change would be more finances. I think that really helps grease the wheels. I mean, the industry's kind of rigged towards brands that have money. With the brands that don't, you're kind of at the mercy of people loving it, and wanting to support it, whether that's wanting to support me or support the brand or, whatever it is. It's, the personal touch is such a big part of the industry. Finances would have got me more salespeople, which would obviously be a blessing. I'm not out in the trade as much as I was when I started, but I could have done with a few of those nights being replaced by someone else. When you're on your 40th bar of the week and you're probably 80th cocktail, you're very much in need of rescuing. I think in that situation, I think I probably would have taken a bit more time over production. I thought 12 to 15 months was plenty. But we were doing something that had never been done before, and I didn't realise that. And it was only when we got into our second and third batches and how complicated production is that you start to realise that, this is why people use flavourings or colourings, because it's because everything else is an absolute nightmare to work with. Every ingredient has its foibles, but I don't think I'd change how. I wouldn't change the ingredients. I think you learn to work with them, but yeah, more finance, a different era, perhaps. I think if I could have my time again, I'd launch 15 years.
Roaring 20s, maybe.
Well, that would have helped. Yeah, we'd be a legendary brand by now. I would have thought. But yeah, I think a different era would have been a good one. Early to mid 2000s, that would have been great. But I think we're entering a golden era in cocktail making. I've certainly noticed in the last 6-9 months that venues that weren't interested in cocktails like before are suddenly going, oh, our customers keep asking for cocktails, so now we've got to look at it. And these are traditional like spit and sawdust ale pubs going, oh, we need to make an espresso martini or whatever. I think we could be about to enter a really exciting time for the cocktail industry.
And for the industry in general, is there anything, if you could wave a magic wand, is there anything that you would change about it?
If it was a magic wand and I could change it, I think things I would probably change is the impact the big companies have on the rest of the industry. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the brands pay to be there. So the big companies with the big bar groups negotiate contracts and pay them hundreds of thousands of pounds, things like that. I think there's a reason that a lot of the bars are generic, because the brands are all paying to be there. I think a more level playing field is something that I would certainly push for. But obviously money talks. I'd like to, if it was a magic wand, I'd like to see more great bars as well. I think what we're incredible at in this country is creating really great bars. We're near like Three Sheets here. That's one of the best bars in the country. And I'd like to see more of those type of bars. I'd like to see more local products as well. We work really closely with like Astley Brothers and Volt and things like that. And they are incredible, world-class liquids, better than a lot of the stuff that people drink normally, I find. And I think I'd like to see more of them. I'd like to see more British creativity outside of gin. I think we've got a bit stayed on that front. You look at brands like Capriolis, that's an incredible brand. Phenomenal. What Barney's doing is off the charts. But then Robert Astley's creating phenomenal liquids. Dan from Volt's doing the same. There's so much talent in this market, and I'd like to see more of it. I'd like to see more come to the fore, because the knowledge is there, the ingredients are there. Probably again, finances more than anything else. But we're very lucky to have great quality local products and great quality bars, and I'd just like to see more of both.
Yep. I would like to ask you about the partnership with TONIC.
Oh yes,
how you feel about that, and how that what you see, why you think that might be a benefit for your brand.
Well, you guys have been phenomenal. You've been absolutely amazing, and it's such a privilege to have industry people like you guys, supporting little old me. It's unheard of, really, and it almost harks back to an age where people were a lot kinder to each other, and I think that's something that people like you lead the way in that as well. And hopefully someday I can return the favour.